Historian, Ohio State University, Pietro Shakarian. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam, for having me on. It's a great pleasure to be on your show
Thank you,
this
very
morning.
kind of you. How would you characterize the historical relationship between Kurds and Armenians?
Well, we go back to the period of the Ottoman Empire. Kurds were unfortunately used by Ottoman authorities to basically persecute the Armenians in the period of the Hamidian massacres, then the 1915 genocide. Right? So this is fairly well known. Kurds today, Kurdish organizations have made amends for this, but also it's important to know that the nature of Kurdish-Armenian relations changes in the aftermath of the genocide, and actually with the founding of the Turkish Republic in 1923. That is to say, with the founding of a new Soviet Armenia, there is a more kind of cooperative relationship that emerges between Armenians and Kurds. In the Soviet Union, there was a big effort to encourage nationalities, national expression. And in Soviet Armenia, there was a big effort to encourage the rights, language rights, and culture of Kurds. And to this degree, you would have, for example, the Kurdish written language. You would have, say, a Kurmanji language written in Armenian script. And then eventually it was changed to Latin script, then Cyrillic script, and then back to Latin script again after the dissolution of the Soviet state. But the first Kurdish film was made in Soviet Armenia in 1926, which is Zade. And in addition to that film, you also have the emergence of the first Kurdish novel by Erem Shamilov in Soviet Armenia, published in Yerevan in the 1930s, The Kurdish Shepherd. And so every step along the way, Armenia was a major center for Kurdish cultural expression. It was also a major center for Kurdology. A lot of people don't know this, but the Russian Empire in general and then the USSR were major centers for Kurdology internationally. And actually, it was an Armenian, Khachaturi Bovyan, who was responsible for really kind of leading the way in Kurdish studies and collecting Kurdish folklore. And this was also the same man, Abovyan, who wrote the first modern Armenian novel, right? But also there is the chapter of Kurdish radio broadcasts, Radio Yerevan broadcast, which the Kurdish language, as you know, Adam, was repressed in Turkey, in Iraq, in Iran, all these countries. And so for them to pick up these radio broadcasts from Armenia, where they heard their own native language, this was a major thing for the Kurdish national movement and Kurdish national self-expression. So this kind of more cooperative element of the Kurdish-Armenian relations doesn't just begin in recent years. It has a longer history that goes back to the Soviet era.
How does Russia factor into the regional picture both historically and presently?
Well, for Russia, in many ways, first of all, there's a political side and then there's an academic side. So if we look at the academic side, Russia, as I said, was always a center for Kurdology, especially if we look at St. Petersburg, Leningrad. This was a major place where, Kurdish ethnography, folklore was collected, where Kurds were studied. You have Orbeli, who was the head of the Hermitage, who was a specialist in Kurdish language and Kurdish studies. So, and again, of course, there's the Armenian connection there. When Armenia was part of the USSR, Russia, by extension, had that access to this Kurdology in Yerevan. And there's also a political aspect too, which is Russia. They historically, have been promoting, in their own way, Kurdish rights, but also this has kind of a geopolitical aspect to it as well. So we have the example of the Mahabad Republic after the end of World War II, where basically Stalin promoted the emergence of this Kurdish Republic in northern Iran, and then he pulled the plug on them. And you see the consequences of that. On the other hand, Barzani, who was basically the Minister of War of that republic, fled into the Soviet Union, and he was given asylum in the USSR. the whole Barzani clan actually was. So there is a whole history of a political interaction between Russia and the Kurds as well. So there's the cultural one, the academic one, but also a political one as well in the history.
Thank you. Since the dissolution of the USSR, there has been a growing controversy among the Kurmanji-speaking peoples within Armenia in terms of split between those who self-identify as Kurds and those who self-identify as Yazidis. Can you tell us more about the phenomenon?
Well, so basically, Kurds and Yazidis, they share a common language. This is Kurmanji language, and you would have those who argue that Yazidis basically are, they're also Kurds, and then you also have those who are Muslim Kurds, and Yazidis would make a distinction here. They would say those who are Muslim Kurds are the actual Kurds, and we Yazidis are an actual ethnic group. Now, this movement to recognize Yazidis as a separate group completely has really gained a lot of traction since the dissolution of the USSR in 1991. This wasn't such the case in this wasn't so much the case in the Soviet times, when you had kind of the repression on religion. You had a how do you say this? That you had this repression on religion, but you also had so you had kind of this homogenization of Kurmanji peoples as all Kurds, right? So Erem Shamilov, who I mentioned, was Yazidi, right? But he identified with the Kurdish nation. Now, what you have today is this split, but you also have some people. So you have some Yazidis who identify as Kurds in Armenia, right? You have some who live, close to Yerevan in kind of Armavir region, but also some who live near Mount Adagats. And some of those who actually tend to live in the north tend to be more pro-Kurdish in their identity. Others tend to be more pro-Yazidi. Those who tend to be pro-Kurdish actually are vocal in their support of Kurdish oppositional groups in Turkey, in Armenia. They voice support for Ocalan, let's say. So yeah, I mean, there is this split. It's a very unfortunate split because at the end of the day, they all speak the same language. They are kind of from the same ethnos, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, I've met people from both sides of that divide in Yerevan.
What options do Kurds and Armenians have for regional development today, given Turkey's historic hostility to them?
I think a big point in terms of regional development, in terms of cooperation between Armenians and Kurds, actually goes back to recognizing this history that existed during the Soviet era, which is not really well explored. And the more we look into this history, and the more we see, the level of interaction, cooperation, how the radio broadcasts in the Soviet period really impacted the development of Kurdish national consciousness. So the Armenians, this is something that they actually should recognize, but also, this is something certainly Kurds recognize, but it's something that really should be highlighted more in Armenia. And more effort should be made to also connect that with the kind of current reconciliation between Armenians and Kurds in Turkey today. On the other hand, it's also important to stress to make this, I think, more of a cultural cooperation. Because for Armenians and Kurds, you don't want it to get, political, where it could get to a point where it could somehow endanger these people. It could somehow hurt Kurdish activists in Turkey, let's say. So you want to make sure that I think that there should be an intensification of cooperation between Kurds and Armenians, especially in the context, first of all, within Turkey, but also within the Armenian Republic. But it also should be done in such a way that it does not actually hurt the movement for Kurdish national self-expression in Turkey or in other countries for that matter.
Historian, Ohio State University, Pietro Shakarian, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments today.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Thank you.